Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for joining me today to talk about how to avoid reactive agile to build a sustainable agile culture. My name is Eric Naiburg. I run marketing and operations here for Scrum.org, and I'm going to take you through the presentation today. I've done this presentation a few times now, so hopefully it's continued to improve, used some empiricism, gotten feedback, and improved upon it. There's actually an article that I've written that kind of goes through a lot of this material as well. If anybody's interested, you can feel free to reach out to me or check out our website. It's up on our website where you can learn and read more about it. So let's get started. First off, just to let you know, your microphones will be muted, but please ask questions in the questions window. Either you can tweet them at Scrum.org, hashtag ScrumPulse, or if you're already in the UI anyway, you can go right to questions and we'll take questions at the end. A little bit about Scrum.org. We are the home of Scrum, founded by and chaired by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum. And we continue to improve Scrum, how it works, what it does, and really focusing on helping you, people, individuals who are using Scrum, improve how you're using it and improve how you deliver products with greater agility. We provide a lot of free resources out on our website, including this webinar series. We've got a new series coming up soon as well that we just announced in our newsletter yesterday called Ask an Expert, where we'll have our trainers from around the world, over 230 of them now, answering your questions, dealing with your difficult situations and trying to help you. You can find more information at scrum.org/scrumpulse or on our YouTube channel for recordings as well. So just a little bit about me. I am the Vice President of Marketing and Operations here for Scrum.org. I've written a few books. They also probably show my age based on the titles of UML for Mere Mortals and UML for Database Design. I've been doing this, working in software development in really software and product development process for about 25 years, helping organizations build products. Most of my career has been spent in product management and product ownership. And I threw this picture in here because of a story that I'll tell in a few minutes as we go through, but you can see me there in the, as some people say, the warrior gear, the catcher's gear down at the bottom. I still play some baseball, and those of you who are Boston Red Sox fans, you may recognize the guy in the top without a hat on. That's Oil Can Boyd, former Major League All-Star and pitcher for the Red Sox, pitched in a few World Series, and I got to catch him, so that was kind of cool too. But you'll know why this picture is here in a few minutes. So how do we avoid reactive agile to build that sustainable culture? And when I think about it in what we need to do, we can kind of narrow it down to 5 things. There's a lot more than that, and I'll go through it. But the way I've structured this presentation, we start with support and protect the agile values with strong leadership. Help teams and stakeholders to self-organize, manage the portfolio with outcomes, not outputs. It's not about outputs. It's really about, are we delivering the right things to market? Systemically remove sources of waste and delay faced by agile teams. And lastly, measure and improve value delivered with frequent feedback. We need to continuously inspect and adapt. Agile is all about inspection and adaptation. It's all about continuing to improve what we deliver and how we deliver it. And this is so important. And it's so important to have and build a culture that helps enable this. So first, support and protect agile values with strong leadership. And leadership isn't a title. Leadership isn't thrust upon you. I know some very, very good managers who are not great leaders, and vice versa. Many leaders who are not managers, not executives, but really helping to lead organizations and lead teams and lead people. And we need to look at those differently. We need to separate out the HR management role from the leadership role. And what I mean by that is it can be the same person. It's not a particular role. And it's not something that's thrust upon somebody. but a leader leads. And when I talk about this and when I do this presentation in a public forum, meaning in front of people live where I can see them, I'll ask those questions. How many of you think you're a leader? How many of you think your teams think you're a leader? How many of your teams think you're a leader and you don't even perceive yourself as that, and so on? And those are very important because we need to lead, and we need to enable. A large part of leadership is enabling. It's not actually always doing. It's enabling the teams to do and the individuals that we work with to do the things that they need to do, and then them seeing us as leaders within the organization. This is so important. So, let's take a step back. Why do we need to seek agility? Well, we've got pressures from both sides. We've got pressures from competitors and pressures from our customers, and we must be able to respond. And as the markets continue to evolve, as what's happening in industry continues to evolve, as we find it both easier and in some ways more difficult to respond more quickly, our competitors are doing the same things. Our customers are expecting it. Our customers just expect change now, and they can easily move from one product to another, from one organization to another. So we need to be able to respond quickly to do that. And you've all seen slides like this where we talk about the new and up and coming companies, or the companies that didn't exist, say 10 or 15 years ago. What's really impressive about these isn't the fact that they've come out of nowhere in many cases, but they're really changing how we deliver products and how they deliver products. Right? None of these organizations own the things that they actually sell or make. I guess we could change this a little bit. Well, I guess Netflix doesn't own cinemas, but they do now manufacture movies, as they have production studios and so on. But these organizations have changed how we as individuals purchase, how we as organizations work and function. And they've been able to really put a drastic change on the market. And it's caused traditional organizations to have to change as well. Now, when I think of these, and again, you've seen these slides from all over the place, or these examples, BlackBerry, Blockbuster, Kodak, and the many others, they have brilliant people working for them. It's not that they didn't have the intelligence or the capability to evolve when others came out from under them, but they didn't have the culture in place to change. They didn't really have the ability to change from a culture perspective, to react. Too many processes, not enough capability within to push for that change and make those changes happen. And we need to enable this from the top down and from the bottom up. We need to be able to make those changes, evolve those changes over time, but be able to react quickly. Sometimes it's just ego, sometimes it's arrogance, but often it's more of a culture. It's a leadership thing. We need to be able to see and do the things that we need to do to evolve, and we need to empower the teams to be able to do that. Because inside every threat is an opportunity just waiting to be discovered. Don't look at Netflix as a threat from a Blockbuster, for example, but start to evolve that. Now, many of these organizations did that, right? Blockbuster came and started to put out online capabilities. Kodak, my first digital camera was a Kodak, as a great example. But were they able to capture the market, seize the market, and evolve as quickly as others? Did they have the culture in place to do those things? So looking at those threats as a way for us to improve, as a way for us to evolve, to start to pivot, as some might say, to use the capabilities and the strength we have in the market to evolve becomes that much more critical. So as Peter Drucker says, culture eats agile for breakfast. Change is hard. And if we don't enable change, if we don't enable the culture, if we don't have that culture in place for greater agility, we're going to be in trouble. But in retrospect, people want to change. They don't resist change. They don't like being changed and forced to change, but they don't resist the change itself. They resist being changed, as Peter Senge says. And there is a difference. It might be subtle, certainly subtle in the words, but we need to help enable that change. We need to lead that change over time. We can't force it. If management says, thou shalt, what happens? Often it doesn't happen, or people go through, they give it lip service, they go through the motions. But if we enable that change, empower people, empower our teams, that change is going to happen with guidance, with leadership, and so on, in helping to drive that change throughout the organization. What shapes some of those cultures, what people do is more important often than what they say and how they work. We've gone and evolved in many organizations from isolation to working together, and working together is great, but that's the only one piece of it. And if people work together, it doesn't always matter how they're working together. Let's enable the teams to make those decisions and how they're going to do that. Allow the teams to work together, empower the teams to work together, and keep moving forward. Leaders make the difference, right? Leaders help to steer toward those goals, but they make it safe. And this is really important. When you think of Scrum and the Scrum values, for example, the Scrum values, a large part of it is to take fear away. And by adhering to the Scrum values, it helps us take the fear away as individuals, as workers on the Scrum team, that if I do something, I'm going to be punished for it. Now, obviously, if I do something that's immoral or such, yes. But if I'm doing what I believe is right, if I'm asking hard questions, I shouldn't be punished for it. It should be a safe environment so that I can enable change and can continue to change. And our leaders need to enable that. They need to model it, but they need to enable it. And some of that enablement is through modeling change, in helping and supporting the teams. If we're not supporting the teams, it becomes very difficult for those teams to change. So the next part, helping teams and stakeholders to self-organize. The self-organization is so important because the people who are going to work together need to be empowered to understand how they can work together. This is a traditional model, right? And this organizational model has been structured for hundreds of years, and it certainly was not built to be fast and agile. It was built with hierarchy and a bit of command and control and so on. And here's why I put that baseball picture up. Imagine this is a baseball team or any sports team around the world, whether you're playing football or football, or lacrosse or soccer or whatever. But I'll use my baseball analogy because I've been sitting behind the plate for 40 years and doing it, right? And imagine if I'm sitting behind the plate catching in a baseball game, and every time I want to call a pitch, I need to go look at the pitching coach, and then the pitching coach needs to go look at the manager, and the manager needs to go look at the general manager, and the general manager needs to go look at the owner of the team. And then they need to feed all that back down to me and tell me what pitch to call. We just got locked. We're not agile. We're not going to be able to make decisions. And oh, by the way, none of those people are as close to what's happening as I am sitting behind the plate, looking right up at that batter, knowing what pitches work and don't work, knowing exactly where pitches fall when the pitcher's throwing the ball to me, how hard it's really coming in. Is there a lot of action on that ball and so on? So empowering that catcher to make those decisions enables the team to function, enables the team and the individuals who are closest to the scenario and situation to function. But I'm seeing what's happening. I'm seeing exactly how these interactions are occurring. And this is the same in organization. Whether I'm building software, building a car, building some sort of a device, it's all the same. Now, do we need guidance? Yes. Do we need vision? Yes. Do we need to be in every day-to-day decision from the executive level? No. We need to empower our teams on how they work and empower our teams to make decisions so they can be fast and they can be agile because they're seeing how things are interacting. They're seeing how things are being used within their systems and so on. So we need to push that power down and enable the teams to be able to make those decisions. It doesn't mean the hierarchy has to go away. It doesn't mean that roles have to go away. But let's empower those teams and empower them to work. We need to shift to a more intrinsic model. People are motivated in many ways. And traditionally, and you can read all about this in Daniel Pink's book called Drive, that you can see there. Traditionally, we've looked at if-then and rewards, short-term productivity, and so on, money as a big influencer on how we work. But when it comes down to it, money's only one piece. That extrinsic motivation is only one piece, and often it's a smaller piece. Now, some people, obviously people are different, but often it's those intrinsic motivations. It's the things that people get satisfaction from that really drive the good work. Of course, we all have to put food on the table and pay our mortgages and things like that. But what really drives us to do an excellent job? What drives individuals to excel? It's those unexpected rewards, that long-term productivity, the heuristic work, and so on. It's really feeling like you're making a difference, feeling like you are empowered to change. Those are the things that go from manufacturing on a line to really feeling like you're a part of the solution. I'll never forget, this is, about 22 or 3 years ago now, one of my first homes that we purchased, and my wife and I lived in, and my neighbor who lived behind me, he worked for an auto manufacturer, and he worked on the line. And he used to always talk about how I can stop the line. He was empowered. He now, the way he would talk about his job, which, that job was very mentally robotic often in times. And he's hanging a door, he's hanging a door, he's hanging a door. But at any point in time, if he saw something going wrong, if he felt there was a problem in the process, he could stop the line. And that made him not just an employee of that auto manufacturer. What that made him was a part of the process, a part of the system, and that empowered him. And he felt that empowerment. He felt as if he was part of the process, part of that team. And for him to come home and talk about this, and he used to talk about it all the time. Now he goes from, I'm making a salary, to I'm really making a car. I'm part of building that car. And I have power if I find there's problems. Now, is he going to make the wrong decision at times? Maybe. Could that cause some delays? Possibly. But it also made him more productive. It made him want to go to work every morning and work. And that power, that motivation was more powerful than anything else that could have been given to him. It's just amazing when we think about how people work, how people think, how they act, and how to help them drive to results. So to become agile, we need to kind of invert the organization. Or, if I was to draw this, and I borrowed this slide, I would actually make it a circle, and put the customer in the middle. A traditional organization is very top down, right? CEOs and VPs and so on, and they're driving toward what they believe customers want. The agile organization turns that on its head. The agile organization is going to put customers first, and the customers are going to drive what is needed. Who's closest to those customers? Often the delivery teams, product owners, business analysts, and so on, that are driving down what we're going to build based on a vision from the CEO and from management and so on. But who's closest to it? Who's closest to the customers? And that agile organization is really looking at not how quickly or what we're delivering. It's are we delivering value? Are we delivering what the customers need? There's a lot of research that's been going on lately that talks about part of the fall of the current organizations, right? Those historically strong organizations, is earnings per share. It's all about optimizing toward earnings per share instead of optimizing toward customer value. The long term, if customers are happy and customers are getting value, they're going to continue to buy from us, and we're going to continue to grow. If we optimize for the shareholders for earnings per share, we may or may not be satisfying the customers because there's other ways to do that, like cutting costs, big deals versus lots of smaller deals, and so on. And we need to change that. We need to start to look at the customers first, and how do we deliver what those customers need. So really kind of turning often older thinking on its head. And that self-organization has to extend to everybody. Our product owners need to be able to work with the stakeholders and decide who are the right people to work with and pulling those in. But they also need to be, there needs to be that respect. There needs to be that respect of the product owner and the development team working with the product owner. The product owner needs to respect the stakeholders. The stakeholders need to respect the product owner and the scrum master and so on. We need to put those working agreements in place. We need to have shared values and goals. If we don't share those values, if we don't put in place the ability for the teams to share those values, we start to run into conflict. We start to run into egos and so on. And we need to work together as teams, and we need to empower this. So back to that earlier slide, leaders need to empower this. If leaders don't empower self-organization, if they don't empower that respect more than anything else, we start to lose. And now we start to disrespect. And once we start to disrespect, the team falls apart, the individuals fall apart, the work that they're doing starts to come apart, and so on. So what kinds of support do Agile teams need? The organization doesn't go away. It doesn't have to go away. We don't have to flatten our entire organization. We can build out studio-type models where parts of the organization are shared services that support the different Scrum teams, for example. We need leadership. We still need a vision for the organization. We need budgeting. We need funding. We need those things. Leadership is important. And we need to continually measure. We need to build those services in. So maybe there's engineering services. Maybe there's other things that are part-time on a Scrum team, or are part of, maybe they're part of that Scrum team, but they report in differently into the structure. That's okay. But we need to build that out. One of the things that I've seen quite often, and this kind of goes back actually, and I'll just flip back to this slide here, which is something I call happy ears. I've worked for many CEOs and vice presidents and organizations who they always want to build what the last customer they met with wanted. And I call that the happy ears, right? Because they heard this, they went out to this big bank, and the big bank said, well, if you built this feature or this capability or added this new product, we'd buy millions. And now all of a sudden they come in and they completely disrupt the organization, and they start making changes of what we're going to build, how we're going to build it, all because of this one customer, which they didn't even get really a commitment. They just heard it in a meeting over an hour conversation, maybe over coffee. And they come back and change the whole organization. And if we put customers first, that means we're not going to make decisions based off of one, right? They're plural of customers. And we're going to go out to several customers. We're going to make sure we're building what multiple want. We're going to make sure that we really have the right view, because often in conversation, someone says X, and that can be interpreted many ways as well. But someone got really excited. That CEO got very excited because they heard, well, if you had this feature, we would buy X. Well, they never really dug into, well, what does that mean? What is X? But also, what does that mean? What is that feature? How would you use it? What would you do with it? And so on. They just jumped to very excited. We need to go back to those customers, or even just to that one customer. And I've been in this situation so many times, and start to ask, what do you really mean? Because maybe you even have it. Maybe they misinterpreted it. Maybe it was something different. Maybe they're just throwing things out there because they had a bad day with a product, and today they're saying that, but tomorrow they're not. So we need to make sure that we're looking at a much broader view than the customer, and don't run around with those happy ears where, oh, we're going to make it rich because of this. We need to empower the product owner to now go and introduce them to that team and lead them down that path. So number 3, manage your portfolio with outcomes, not with outputs. We need to look at the value of what. What are we delivering? What's the value? And how are we doing that? Why do we need empiricism? Why do we need to continually learn, continually improve, and not just push forward, but let's look back. Don't lose sight of history. Most features don't actually improve outcomes. And there's a lot of data, there's a lot of research on this. Here's a link that might help you. But generally, about a third of what we do makes things worse. About a third does nothing, and about a third improves our outcomes. So can we start to switch to that? Can we start to look at how do we get more improving of outcomes? We always have to work on things like removing technical debt. Technical debt makes things worse. Removing it maybe does nothing in the short term, but certainly can help improve outcomes in the longer term. But how do we look at value, not just outputs? Too often, and I've heard people use the term velocity, hypervelocity. This team's faster than that team. They're delivering more than that team. Well, what are they delivering? What's this hypervelocity that we're getting to? Because garbage in is garbage out. I can develop more garbage faster. Does that help the customers? Does that help the organization? We need to learn from what we're developing and make sure we're delivering the right things and measuring that value. We need to have real evidence-based measures and manage to those evidence-based measures. Are we making customers happier? Are we delivering them more value? Of course, is the organization getting value from it as well? Otherwise, we can't exist. But what are the things that we're delivering, and how can we make sure that we continue to deliver more value? So what's an outcome? An outcome is some state experienced by the user of a product. It's that state that they're getting, whether it's good or bad. That is an outcome, and what they're receiving helps them to improve. So when we start to measure and we start to really look at our users, one great way to do that is using personas and looking at the gap. So the persona is the who, so social Sarah in this case, and we're looking at how Sarah works, what she does, her role, how she would use a product, and so on and so on and so on. We have a desired outcome, and we have her current experience. The thing in between her desired outcome and that current experience is that opportunity gap. We need to close that gap. If we focus on our users, it doesn't matter if it's a software product, a hardware product, it doesn't matter what kind of product. It may or may not have software in it. We could be a marketing organization that's working to deliver collateral and web copy. Our customers, our users have an experience, and they'd always like more. I've yet to find a user that doesn't want more. Sometimes they want some things removed, but they always want more. And having things removed might be a desired outcome as well. We need to measure it and look at that gap. We need to understand that gap, and we need to make sure that we're taking an outside-in view, not an inside-out view. We need to empower the teams to be able to do this. We need to empower our product owners to have a final say, and really helping to understand that gap and what that gap defines. Always beware of the hippos. This gets back to that happy ears. And we've all witnessed these, and we've all witnessed the hippos, the highly paid person's opinion. They're important. We must listen to them. Often they may even be the one that signs our checks, but that's just one opinion. We need to be aware of those opinions, because that's one opinion. Take it in as an input, along with all of the other things that are happening. Again, they may be leaders, they may not be leaders, and leaders by the definition of a leader, not by the title of a leader. And this is important, and they don't go away. The hippos are certainly important inputs, and they've got lots of insight, and they help us define our vision and all of those things. But beware of them, because it can be very disruptive. It can be disruptive to the team. As a Scrum Master, we need to make sure the hippos not impacting the team. The hippos can be working with those product owners to define the what, but not coming down to the team. And this is a big struggle as a Scrum Master, as the Scrum Master who's working to protect their team and ensuring that the hippos are staying away, and others, right? All those distractions are staying away, so that the team can focus on the backlog and what they're working on within that sprint, and not to be distracted from it. But we've all worked with hippos. We've all witnessed this. Beware of them. Take them as an input. Don't ignore them, because that input is important. But just remember, as we're building this agile culture, they're one piece of the puzzle, not the entire puzzle. Number 4, so how do we help to remove waste? And systematically removing that waste and delays faced by agile teams. It starts with dependencies and cross-team dependencies. Can we eliminate those cross-team dependencies the best we can? It's never going to go away. Just because if you made a really large team, now you've got cross-person dependencies, which will always exist. But find ways of helping those teams to work together, finding ways of enabling visualization of those dependencies, removing dependencies where we can, having teams understand those dependencies is critical. One of the organizations that I've worked with, we look at dependency mapping. And we build out from our product backlog as we're working, especially within a sprint, and really looking at generally 3 to 5 sprints or so. We're looking at higher level features and functions, and then we're drilling down as we refine that down, and we're looking at where those dependencies lie. If a dependency from team 1 is on team 3, can we pull that capability into team 1 so they can be working in removing that dependency on another team? If not, how do we prioritize that so that the work by team 1 is done so that team 3 can go and keep moving? But also, how does team 3 keep being productive while they're waiting? Not sitting around on their hands, but actually working on things and working across those dependencies. We've all worked in organizations that like this. We've all worked on projects and things like this as well. So we need to come up with and follow ways and master ways of dealing with those dependencies and reducing those dependencies the best we can. This enables the teams to be more productive. This is what we start to see is those cross-team dependencies reduce delivery capability. The more teams we add, the more dependencies we often get. So we'll see things like in this example where team 1 productive, team 2 productive, team 3 productive. All of a sudden we add our fourth team, and we start losing productivity. We're not as productive, and we start a bit of a downward slope instead of continuing higher. Why? Because we've just added so much complexity across teams that it makes it more and more difficult for those teams to work together, for those teams to be able to resolve conflict and so on. So a couple of things we can do here as leaders. One is let those teams self-organize how they work and what work they do. Don't assign work to the teams. The teams should be picking the work that they're going to work on with smarts. And what do I mean by with smarts? They're looking at it not in a silo. They're looking at it across the teams and how does this impact other teams? And they're making decisions at the team, at the product level, not at the team level as well. They may reorganize based on capabilities that are needed on team 1 versus team 4. They may reorganize how they work. They may organize what they work on. But empower those teams to do that. Empower those teams to start to understand that. Provide them with the tools that they need as well to understand dependency maps, to understand what's relying on what, and help them to reduce those dependencies where we can. So often, where does waste occur? And this is based on a study that was done with a client. They're very productive in understanding needs, and all of a sudden they're waiting for feedback and sitting around and waiting for approvals. Right? Then all of a sudden they start to architect a solution. They're building something again, very excited, getting stuff done. Then there's too much design and there's review and approval processes. Then we start coding, we get all excited again and start working. Then all of a sudden we're dealing with engineering and multitasking and efficiencies, right? All the problems we have. And then we start testing and being productive, but we realized that we didn't understand the requirements and we built some of the wrong things, and now all of a sudden we've got to fix stuff, and then we don't deploy, so now we're productive again and things fail, and then eventually it gets to the customer. Waste occurs everywhere. What we do with Agile and what we empower with Agile is to speed some of this up. Again, it's not about velocity always of building more. It's about velocity of getting that customer feedback, of getting these things happening. And I know this kind of comes across as mini waterfall here, but this is the way this organization was working. And as we help to improve this and shrink this down and do these things in parallel, right? So start to build them out in parallel rather than so linear, we start to really help gain agility and improve. So it's about adding the parallels. It's about getting that customer feedback frequently. I was talking to somebody recently who was asking the question of why do we need to review with customers so frequently? Well, otherwise we're building the wrong thing. Potentially. We might be experts and we might really know what the customers want. But the more we can get those customers and other stakeholders involved, the better off we are. I'll give you a great example of this. I was working as a product manager for a company. Some of you may know a product called Irwin. It's a data modeling tool, been around since the mid 90s. And I was the first product manager for that product. And we were kind of doing some inside out development, to be honest. It was a combination of outside in and inside out. We knew that customers wanted the ability to have a data dictionary to build their data models. And in their ability to have this data dictionary, they wanted to easily see, here are my data elements. We could clearly define those data elements. A customer name is, a char 25, and a customer date is this, and so on and so forth. And they wanted that. We wanted that ability, and we knew our customers wanted that. What happened was development went in and built what they thought the customer wanted. And as a product manager, I then eventually, again, we were not practicing Agile back then. This was probably 1995 or 6, somewhere around there. We went out to customers and showed them our data. And they all said, well, wow, that's great. So I can define these, but how do I use them? And we said, well, you open up this dialogue and you search for customer. So they said, oh, so I need to now know that I have built an entity in my data dictionary to define customer and define customer name and so on and so on. Like, yeah. I said, well, that's great if I know what we've already built, but what if I don't know what we've built? I'm going to end up rebuilding things over and over again. I'm going to have inconsistencies. The whole reason you're building a data dictionary is to remove those inconsistencies. So what happened was we waited too long. We waited to get that customer feedback. We waited 6 months when we went into beta and got that customer feedback. I had to stop the release. We actually stopped the release for 3 months. And we went back, and then we started to, and this was probably my first foray into Agile. We actually started reviewing on a weekly basis. So essentially we were doing 1 week sprints with our customers, the latest deployable features. And we built a drag and drop capability where I could see on my screen a list of all of those data dictionary elements, and I could just drag and drop them into my model. I didn't have to go and search and know what already existed. And we did this by going from, okay, we're going to deliver something to we're going to make sure we're delivering the right thing. And that's the biggest difference here. We're delivering the right thing. And we've got lots of inputs, things like budget. We've got we're collaborating. We're going to build new features, and hopefully we're building the right features. Those are the outcomes. And how effective are most organizations in doing this? Generally, they're not. The budgets, yeah, we know what we're going to build, or we know what you're giving what we're being given from a budget perspective to build. We know kind of what we think we want, but are we really effective in building the right features? The what? Are we getting the right outcomes, and how are we measuring those outcomes? And that becomes just that much more important. So number 5, we need to continually inspect and adapt. We need to improve. We need to improve what we're doing, how we're doing it, even why we're doing it. So we have that idea. That idea can come from a product owner. It can come from the CEO. It can come from customers, whoever and wherever that idea comes from. But that product owner now takes ownership of that idea. And they work with the customer to continually get that feedback, to make sure we're delivering economic value to the customer, or value to the customer, which then provides back to the organization that economic value. And we're constantly releasing. Now, all the roles aren't thrown on this slide and all of that. I'm sure someone's like, well, where's the development team? Well, they're all part of this. This is just an example. But that idea, we release something, we get feedback. We release something, we get feedback. We release something, we get feedback. We constantly inspect and adapt. If we're not constantly inspecting and adapting, then we fall into that lull of security. And then we end up like those Kodaks of the world. So one way of starting to look at this, and this comes from work done by Gothal and Seiden in the work that they've done around lean UX. And this is one way of expressing that hypothesis that the product owner might have. We believe by doing this, some sort of a feature for these people, the persona will achieve some sort of an outcome. And we will know that this is true when we see whatever that measurement is, and we need to put that measurement in, has changed. This is a great way to start looking at what we're doing and evolving our culture and how we're thinking and how we're delivering. So this is a real example from one of our customers who's building a healthcare application. As a matter of fact, they're using the Nexus framework, as well as how the team is dealing with all of their dependencies and how multiple Scrum teams are working together on a single product. There's a great case study on them. It's a company called NetHealth out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, here in the US, just the other side of the state from where I'm sitting today. So what they looked at was, we believe that reducing the time required to collect 80% of an insurance claim for a patient will achieve reduced follow-up time and better patient satisfaction. Great outcome. If patients are more satisfied, they're going to be more likely to want to work with us. And our insurers who are using our application are going to be more likely to use our application. So we will know that this is true when we see time spent following up on claims drops. So now the insurance companies are happier because they're spending less time to follow up on claims, and the patients are happier because their net promoter score increases. Their likelihood of recommending that insurance company goes up. This is a great way to start to build out the vision for what we want to build and put that measurement, right? It's very easy to measure NPS score. It's very easy to measure time spent following up on claims. So real empirical evidence, really putting in those measures and helping to drive those measures forward. So using outcomes to plan our sprints. Here's the outcome I'd like to achieve this sprint, says the product owner. The development team, great. We think that if we build these product backlog items, we can achieve that outcome. Communication. It's all about communication. Understanding what is my goal of this sprint, right? So that outcome, that's probably that sprint goal. The development team pulling in the product backlog items into the sprint backlog to achieve that goal. And then working together on what we're trying to achieve. But thinking about outcomes instead of outputs. Not we'd like our velocity to be X. Not we'd like to deliver these features tomorrow. What are the outcomes? What are we really trying to deliver? And how do we then work together as a team to deliver it? And then review that in our sprint reviews. So as we're working in our sprint reviews, focusing on, again, outcomes. What were the results of our experiments? What did we learn? And how do we improve? And this goes across the board. Let's make sure we're asking our stakeholders, whether they're customers or internal stakeholders or users. Maybe we're building an internal application and our stakeholders are users, but they're not what I'd call end customers. And helping that team to constantly learn and constantly improve. So use outcomes in your sprint reviews rather than just showing a whole bunch of features. We know what results went in. We know what we were trying to measure. Did we meet that objective? Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Stakeholder. We know you wanted to be able to do X better, right? If we go back up, we know you wanted to spend less time on claims. Do you think these features will help you spend less time following up on claims? If the answer is no, we've got a problem. Ask those questions of your stakeholders. Make sure that we're following and focusing on those outcomes. Because if the features we just delivered don't help meet those outcomes, why did we deliver them? That's great. We delivered a whole lot of stuff. Going back about 10 or 15 slides, we delivered not valuable stuff to our stakeholders, but we delivered a lot of stuff. Delivering a lot of stuff is not value. Delivering the right things, delivering on our outcomes is value. So in summary, like I said, there's a great article, or what I thought was a good article, a little long, but a good article that talks about this and kind of takes you through a lot of this, and reach out to me or just check out the website. You can find it there. Support and protect Agile values with strong leadership. Leaders are born, they're not assigned. And be a leader. To help the teams feel empowered, help the teams feel protected. Help teams and stakeholders to self-organize. Don't get in their way, but enable them, empower them, and help them, because people are more satisfied when they feel like they're a part of something. Manage your portfolio with outcomes, not outputs. Let's not talk about velocity, or velocity is only one piece of that puzzle. And don't compare velocity of two teams, because every team is different. How we measure it, how we look at it, and they'll game the system. I've heard so many stories of people say, well, we're measuring velocity across different teams, and that team is much more productive than that team. Well, guess what? The minute you start measuring velocity that way, they're going to game the system. What used to be a 3 is now a 5, and so on. So we need to look at teams individually, and let's look at the value that they're delivering, not necessarily the outputs. Systematically remove sources of waste that might get in the way, and measure and improve value with constant feedback. Get that feedback, continuously inspect and adapt, keep improving as you go forward. So you can learn more in our community. Check out our forums, ask questions, answer questions. We're always looking, and people are always looking for answers. You have insights as much as anybody else. Go check out the forums, respond, help, learn, evolve. Certainly follow us on different social media. Check out the blogs. Our professional Scrum trainers are writing constantly on our blogs, lots of videos, and of course, this series and other webcasts. So with that, Lindsay, if we have any, we can take some questions.
Sure. We have quite a few questions here. This first one here is from Daniel. How do you do Agile within ops itself? Not meaning DevOps with culture or practices, but how do you transform the traditional IT mindset to the Agile mindset and work that way?
Wow, that's a big question, Daniel. And I've certainly got some ideas. I actually, prior to coming to Scrum.org, and I've worked for a bunch of organizations more in software development, but my last organization was an operations job, and I worked in a hardware cloud provider. So actually, we were doing this, and we were evolving this, and it was about how we worked. It was about how we thought, and adding new capabilities to our operations team to be able to do that. And what we built out were agile teams who were more empowered, number one. And this came, again, had to come from the top down as much as it's the bottom up. We had to make people feel empowered, but we also had to empower them. Right. And that's one of the things that you have to watch, because often we can say the words, oh, you're empowered, but then not act the act, or walk the walk and talk the talk. But what we were able to do was to start looking at the capabilities that we were going to deliver in a more agile fashion. And this was all about deploying hardware, deploying systems, deploying patches to operating systems, those sorts of things. And we looked at it in what's going to drive value to the customer. We also, we use security as that. And part of our definition of done, we had security in our definition of done. So we were looking at, we had strong PCI requirements, for example, for the payment credit card industry. So nothing could go out without going through PCI scans. And that was part of our definition of done. Now, does that maybe limit some of our agility? Yes. Is that mandatory? Absolutely. And we couldn't deploy a patch without that. So not everything can be done with I'll say, speed of agile, but we were constantly learning. We were constantly inspecting and adapting. And you can constantly look at, did we deliver the right things? Are we doing the right things? How do we improve our processes? And how do we improve how we're working as much as what we're delivering? So I know that's a kind of a short answer to a much longer question, but hopefully that helps a little bit.
Okay, here's another one from Reynaldo. What techniques do you recommend to reduce dependencies across teams?
So there's a few things we can do there, and there's actually a great white paper up on our website that talks about this. If you go to resources, scaling Scrum, that talks through this. But one of the best ways to reduce dependencies is, first you have to understand them. So in your sprint planning, looking at and mapping out visually, what are those dependencies? We run an exercise in our scaling Scrum, scaled professional Scrum with Nexus class, where we actually use sticky arrows, and we put our product backlog up on the board, and we start to look at and visualize the dependencies across teams. And then we make decisions on how to prioritize features that we might be building, or PBIs, product backlog items, based on those dependencies. But if we don't map those out first, and there's some tools that do this, some of them better than others, and I've seen people customize Jira, for example, to better visualize this. But if we don't understand those dependencies first, it becomes very difficult for us to overcome them. So, the short answer is, let's understand the dependencies, and then let's deal with them. And that might be, starting to create feature teams rather than component teams. Might be your solution. It, again, depends on a whole lot of other factors. But by being able to do that, because now you might run into the risk of tech debt and reuse and things like that. So that's going to vary from team to team and organization to organization. But start with visualization. Start with understanding the dependencies and talking through them. One of the biggest things in failures I've seen is everybody working in a silo, or teams even working in a silo. If we don't talk about those dependencies, how are we going to deal with them? I probably have time for one or two more, Lindsay.
Sure. This question comes from David. How can you show outcomes in a sprint review, like how the customer benefit from it and before the customer ever uses it?
So if you may not show the final benefit yet in that sprint review because they haven't used it, but you can certainly talk through the benefits that you and your stakeholders believe they will gain. And then we can, once we've deployed, we should be reviewing that feedback. It's a great question, because you're right. You can't always prove the benefit, but we can certainly talk through that benefit. So working with the stakeholders, asking the questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. So a sprint review should not be a demo. What happens in quite often in sprint reviews I've seen is it becomes a demo. What's a demo? A demo is selling. A demo is where I'm just going to tell you the things I want you to hear. I'm going to sell you on the good stuff, and I'm going to hope for a whole lot of head nods, yes, and then we move on. That's not a sprint review. A sprint review should be an interaction. It should be a give and take. And by having that give and take, by asking questions of the stakeholders, how do you think you would use this? What benefit do you feel you will get from this? That's how you start to get that. Now, of course, long term, you need to measure that. You need to put, and again, if you go to resources, evidence-based management up on the Scrum.org website, you'll find a guide and a lot of great thoughts and ideas around how to put measures in place. But you can't get all those measures until something's built. But in the meantime, have conversations. If the worst thing you could do is make a sprint review one way. I hate the word demo. I know, we talk about you demonstrate the product in the Scrum guide. We're demonstrating it, but we're not doing a demo. We're not doing a sales process. So start there, and that's a great way to start to get the feedback. Do you think people will get value from this? Ask those questions. What sort of value do you think people will get? How do you feel this will be used? Do you feel it will be used? Those sort of probing questions to start to get that feedback and move forward. So thank you all for attending today. I know we've got a whole lot more questions I'm seeing listed. I'll try to answer them one-on-one through email and responding back. And again, thank you very much. I know this is a short session to cover a pretty large topic, and feel free to reach out if you have more questions as well. Thank you very much.